almost 12 months now in, it's fair to say that as Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves was a bit of a darling of the city. She held these breakfasts, didn't she? And everybody sort of signed, this is going to be... How's she doing, Andy?
Well, let's be clear. I mean, it's been a disappointing almost 12 months. I think everyone would say that. Business would plainly say that. The city would say that. Citizens would say that. I think backbenchers would say that. It's not been the plan, gone to plan. The good news, I'd say, Nick, and there is a little bit, is that this year started a little bit perkier than many people expected. And, fingers crossed that might continue.
Why? How much is she the author of her own misfortune, Andy?
To some significant degree. There's been mistakes, rookie errors, actually.
Outline some of those for the
Well, I mean, the black hole announcement sucked the confidence from business and consumers. The budget compounded that felony and how it was certainly described. On too many measures, Nick, it's felt like the fiscal cart has been put in front of the growth horse, to be honest. It's felt penny pinching. It's felt small. It's not been the sort of thing we need to get the animal spirits in the country going, and therefore the country growing. And that's been errors, more than one. They are redeemable. There's still time, but not that much time, because unless you plant the policy seeds now, they will not germinate and grow by the time of the next election.
How comfortable do you think she appears in the post at the moment? Do you think she's aware of some of the missteps you've just outlined?
Yeah, I think the body language has been very, very telling over the past few months. Understandably, because, the criticism has been pretty brutal and in some cases pretty personal. I've got no time for the personal criticism, but I think the policy mistakes should have been fessed up to and should have been corrected. Some of them probably are now being corrected. But let's take winter fuel. It should not have taken 9 months to course correct on that. And that in some ways makes a bad situation somewhat worse.
You're all about growth. I heard you speak at the City AM Awards. I think it was last month, but it was certainly very recently anyway. You don't think the government's doing enough for growth?
No.
Or anywhere near enough, do you?
Not even close. To be clear, by growth, I don't mean something as arid as GDP. I mean people's living standards, people's sense of things getting better in their community, Nick. The sense that today's young generation be better off than their parents, which they are not. And people feel that in their bones. And it's only by going at this with real gusto and at real scale, Nick, at real scale. Let's take defence today.
Please, I was going to get you onto it anyway, so do it now.
It is directionally good that we are spending more on defence. But look, the absolute bare minimum was done to get Keir Starmer through a meeting with Donald Trump, right? We now look like a laggard on defence spend relative to much of the rest of the world. Yes, that will generate a few more jobs outside of the southeast, but nothing like on the scale we need to get growth going,
So you'd go 3% like that, would you?
Well, I would certainly make a very firm commitment to go through the gears from 2.5 to 3 to I think something close to 3.5%.
Which is what Mark Rutte wants, of course, in
exactly.
direction.
Plus the 1.2 in defence-related spending. I think with that you have a clear North Star behind which you then build confidence among businesses to get behind that commitment and to begin to employ people today on the expectation of spending tomorrow.
Have they got the money?
Well, they can have the money. It will require Rachel to loosen her self-imposed fiscal chains to some degree. And indeed, we'll need to see some tax rises, I suspect, towards the end of the year. We'll need a bit more borrowing, a bit more taxation, and a loosening of our fiscal shackles to step up to the plate on defence things and beyond. And the truth is, the growth dividend from that, Nick, will pay for the extra borrowing.
Given the promises that they gave in opposition, though, no increase in taxes, how are they going to do it? They just have to break their promise.
Well, I think we're deeply into U-turn territory already, Nick, are we not?
Almost on a weekly basis.
Yes. So I suspect the worm has already turned on that front, and therefore it'll be somewhat easier come the budget, and it will be the budget rather than the spending review later this month, where there is a chance for a reset, a significant reset of the story, because we're lacking a story right now about how the economy is going to get going. and backing that up, not just with words about change, but with money to back up that change. You tell that growth story, and actually bond markets, which are definitely fragile right now, they lap it up.
Growth, GDP up by 0.7% January to March. Your take on that?
Yeah, better than expected. And that's the bright spot, I would say, that last year, we found for the last 18 months, actually, Nick, that the money in people's pockets is now increasing. Wages are rising faster than prices. But the second half of last year, that extra money was being saved rather than spent. People took fright at all the nasty stories being told about what's to become of us. We've seen in the first quarter of this year, people starting to put that money to work and spend in the shops, and that's a good thing. Will that survive Trump and his tariffs? I mean, time will tell, but I'm sort of quietly optimistic about that, Nick.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about Trump in just a moment, but as we're on the pound in my pocket or the purse or wallet, inflation, 3.5%. How nervous are you about that? And will it rise? Will it go higher?
Well, I think there's a chance it might pick up, but I wouldn't worry overly about it as things stand. Look, we've got an economy that's still flatlining, right? It's not going gangbusters on the growth front. So I think at the moment it is being hit by taxes and by energy costs. But still we have inflation within spitting distance, really, of its 2% target. Certainly there's not enough reason right now, Nick, for my former colleagues at the Bank of England, not to keep on cutting rates. We've had, 4 so far? We should be looking at 2-3 more over the course of this year. And that will help.
Deputy Governor Sarah Breeden, who I'm sure you know, or certainly you know of, in the Sunday Times says she thinks there are more on the way.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more on the way. I mean, if anything, well, I think if we had another 2 or 3 this year, that would be about right.
Where would you want to get to?
Well, big figure 3, 3 and a bit, say 12 months from now, I think would be the sort of support the economy needs to get it going and growing.
What if they don't do that? What happens?
Well, we risk a further period of stasis, the like of which we've had for the last 3 years, Nick. It's not all about interest rates, but we need them to provide a tailwind to growth, and that needs them to get a bit lower than what they are currently.
No conversation involvement in your previous world, and we want to talk about the RSA in a moment, but your previous world as an economist is complete without talking about Trump and tariffs. What are we witnessing there, Andy Haldane?
Well, a lot of noise, not much signal, I'd say. So I'm I think there was a real fearfulness when the tariff schedule was first announced back at the beginning of April. I think we've seen over the subsequent period that there was a lot of bluff in that. Lots of pausing, lots of reversing, often within 24 hours. Now, there's still the uncertainty that accompanies that, but actually we've seen since then the stock market recover quite a bit of its losses in the US and elsewhere. We've seen growth held up pretty well, actually, in the US. So I hope the bark there was worse than the bite, and that the headwind to global growth, and indeed UK growth, is not as much as people feared, 2 months ago.
You travel the world a lot. You'll have friends who are economists all around the world. How do they view Britain currently?
Well, a bit mixed, to be honest. I mean, the truth is, relative to much of the rest of the world, we look like a bastion of stability in political terms, despite everything, right? And sterling assets are still cheap. The things we do brilliantly, English language, university, are fantastic business. That remains true.
And the city, we have to say.
And the city,
as well,
one of the jewels in the crown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if there were a time to be leaning in to us as a place to do business, it is now.
And are they? Are businessmen and women leaning in?
Not yet. They're yet convinced.
What's the hurdle? Why can't we get them in?
Well, a bit of the hokey-cokey from government, I think. They haven't got a clear line of sight of what the government's about and whether it will back them. If there was that clear line of sight, I think there's a decent chance we'd be attracting people and money and businesses as never before. So I think there's a real opportunity here now.
Coming towards the end of our conversation, we've talked a lot about Donald Trump, we've talked about Sir Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. Can I talk about Nigel Farage? He's talked about his plan for growth. He's talked about the idea of that child benefit. He's talked about encouraging Brits to have children to bring about growth. There's a lot of criticism. The man's numbers don't add up. What would you say about his economic forecast there?
Well, there's elements of that I support. I think the removing the 2-child cap on benefits absolutely would be the right thing to do. I think looking at ways in which we can attract foreign capital and business and people is absolutely fundamental for all the reasons we have said. We do need that arithmetic to add up. And there are some question marks, as you know, Nick, about whether enough extra could be raised to meet the extra cost of the commitments that have been made. That's a debate that will pan out over the next few years. But listen, the one thing I would say is if you are to go right now, go big and go bold or go home. We have had enough, Nick, initiative after initiative in this country over decades that have all been subscale. Good press release, not a hope in hell of lifting the dial on growth. And my appeal to any party right now is not just bring a plan, but bring a plan at scale and get behind it with both words and with money. Otherwise, shut up.
So don't expect a lot from the Chancellor later this month. Do look to the budget, and do you look to things such as inheritance tax? Where else would you be looking come the budget later this year and the Chancellor?
Well, I mean, were it me, I'd be looking at our taxation of the housing market and whether that is as we would wish. I mean, council tax is a very peculiar tax, the way it's configured right now and as outdated as it is. You might look at things like VAT on various things. You know, there are avenues there. I would not be looking necessarily to chase away the wealth creators. We've done that very effectively in the first 9 months of this year.
Are you worried about that?
Yes, I am. And the numbers are now
a lot of
speaking
people
for
say
themselves.
if they don't want to stay, let them go. Let them go to Dubai. Let them go to Italy. If they don't want to stay here, why should we care? Is what by the way, I don't concur with that, but that's what some people say, Andy.
Well, I mean, there are limits on that. You know, there'll always be some casualties from any tax rise. It looks to me now, though, not just through taxes, but the atmosphere, the mood has been one that doesn't make people here with money feel comfortable keeping it here. I spoke to a friend last week, and he was saying, you know, he's got a bunch of wealthy clients. 80% of them have moved abroad over the last 9 months. And that suggests that the medicine has been applied into greater dose. We can ill afford that at right now. At a time we should be attracting people and money, we can't be afford to be repelling them.
Quick word on your work at the Royal Society of Arts, and you're bringing down the curtain on that now.
End of the month, 6 months lie down, Nick, to rest and recuperate. But the Society will go on doing great
you enjoyed
things.
It?
I enjoyed it hugely, actually, because it got me to meet...
What have you learned?
I learned that there's great virtue in letting people be master of their own destiny at the local level. You know, if we are to get growth going, we can look to Whitehall, we can look to politicians, but ultimately empowering local people in local communities to get on and do it with the powers and the monies is absolutely key to creating growth and opportunity in local places.
So what's next for Andy Haldane? Manchester United job might be going.
Well, I was thinking, I hear from a friend of mine, not a million miles away, that the way to fame and fortune's radio presenting. So I was...
You want to do breakfast cover, do you, when I'm off on holidays?
Well, you know,
I'll see what I can
never
do.
say never, Nick.
I'm not without influence. Andy, great having you by. Andy Haldane was Chief Economist of the Bank of England and is the outgoing Chief Executive of the Royal Society of Arts and has taken